This article is titled Painters and Their Rays by Benjamin Creme. The article was first published in Share International magazine in August-September 1994, and for information on the 7 rays, see the works of Alice A. Bailey, particularly Esoteric Psychology, Volume 1. Also see chapters on the rays in Benjamin Creme's Maitreya's Mission, Volume 1, and Maitreya's Mission, Volume 2. Description of the 7 rays. There are 3 rays of aspect. First ray of power, will, or purpose. Second ray of love, wisdom. And third ray of active, creative intelligence. There are 4 rays of attribute. Fourth ray of harmony through conflict or beauty or art. Fifth ray of concrete science or knowledge. Sixth ray of abstract idealism or devotion. And seventh ray of ceremonial order or magic or ritual or organization. This constitutes the 7 rays in total. Painters and Their Rays by Benjamin Creme. This article is about painting, but from an unusual standpoint. I will discuss certain painters, all of them famous old masters, from the point of view of their ray structures. Readers might then get an insight into the role played by the rays in the style and quality of particular painters. There is another reason for choosing these particular painters. They are, without exception, now masters. Not necessarily working in this world on the physical plane, but on higher levels. At the time they were working, the painters we will discuss were inspired by masters. When we talk about initiates of their level, we literally mean inspired by their master. Not in a vague way, but inspiration as meaning a particular relationship between disciple and master. It is the term for the end stage of that relationship. Initially, the disciple is held at a distance and never really allowed to come close. The cella on the thread, as it is called. The disciple is gradually brought closer until he is within the master's aura. He is brought closer still until the blending of the lights occurs. The master's and the disciple's mind are as one. Whatever the master needs the disciple to know, he instantaneously knows. There is a blending of the light of the 2 minds. That is where inspiration takes place. It is the result of overshadowing to the point of inspiration where the master is really working through the disciple. The stages leading up to this relationship involve simply mental impression. The Master D.K. has written, through Alice A. Bailey, that artists are to be found on all the rays, but that the combination of 7th and 4th ray makes for the highest type of artist. Those who have studied the list of over 600 initiates in Maitreya's Mission, Volume 1, will find, almost without exception, that the rays 4 and 7 are outstanding in the ray structures of all the painters. It is interesting also, when looking at these painters, to note the influence on their work of the rays of the nations in which they were born. The rays of the nation always influence the work of an artist or musician, whatever their individual rays might be. Remember also that it is not the rays themselves which make someone great or small. It is the point in evolution which is relevant, and the consequent use of the rays. Cimabue, 1240 to 1302. For his time, Cimabue was very advanced, 2.35 degrees initiate. Today, that would be the equivalent of an advanced working disciple, someone like a top statesman with a large group of people working under him. Cimabue's ray structure was interesting. Soul 6, personality 6-6, mental 4-4, astral 6-2, and physical 7-7. He had a 6th ray soul, which was common in the 13th century among initiates. a great many Italian painters have sixth and fourth rays prominently in their makeup. What one has to remember in the case of initiates is that they represent the soul aspect of their country, in this case the sixth ray of idealism and devotion. The masses as a whole express the personality ray, which with Italy is the fourth. Although he was working away from it, Cimabue was influenced by the Byzantine tradition, highly stylized, unrealistic, almost no perspective. One can just see the beginning of perspective in some of his work. There are 4 sixth rays in Cimabue's structure, and if that doesn't make one a devotee, nothing on earth will. Together with a large number of sixth rays, which give Cimabue's painting its particular devotional quality, he also has 2 fourth rays and 2 seventh rays, which make him one of the highest types of artist. The quality of devotion is obvious in his paintings, for example, of the Madonna and Child. They are really icons, visions of a divine and very abstract idea of the Virgin with the Child, usually surrounded by angels. They are more objects of worship than paintings simply to be looked at, and of course they were originally painted for churches. Even today, in Greek and Russian Orthodox churches, the icon is carried round for the people to kiss. It is believed to be charged with divine energy because it is the image of a divine being. Exactly the same thing would be expected of a Cimabue painting, an icon radiating divine energy into the church and focusing the aspiration of the people. Only a sixth ray devotional painter could express the particular abstract idealism which his paintings demonstrate. Cimabue is now a highly evolved 6th degree master, an ascended master. He works on one of the 7 higher globes of this earth. No reproduction can give adequate expression of the extraordinary power of Cimabue's paintings. The power comes partly from their size, but also from the intense concentration of sixth ray energy, so that the whole picture radiates the devotional worship characteristic of this great initiate. Giotto, 1267 to 1337. Giotto was the major pupil of Cimabue, whose work overlapped from the 13th to the 14th century. One being the teacher of the other, there is a stylistic resemblance, reflecting the same artistic conventions typical of the time in which they both lived. Giotto had almost identical rays to his teacher, but in different positions, and this, of course, is what drew them together. Looking at their paintings, we might see that this different positioning of the rays accounts for the differences in the quality, feeling, and flavor of their work. Giotto's ray structure is as follows: soul 6, personality 4-4, mental 6-6, astral 2-4, and physical 7-7. Cimabue's paintings are large, abstract, remote, and powerfully devotional. Giotto's are devotional, not so abstract, and they have the beginnings in art of a humanistic radiance, which is more immediate and much less remote. Giotto was 2.4 degrees initiate, again almost the same as Cimabue, and he is now also a 6th degree initiate. Instead of Cimabue's double 6 personality, here we have the required double 4s of the painter. With Giotto, although he was still closely tied to the Italian primitive style from Byzantium, we have a much more humanistic and narrational style. He is telling a story. Giotto's double 4th ray personality makes him need to communicate, to express his awareness, in this case of the Christian story and ideas. As his work evolved, it became more and more humanistic and less abstract. He is the great forerunner of the humanistic art to come. Rembrandt, 1606 to 1669. Rembrandt van Rijn is one of the best-known Dutchmen of all time. He was a 3rd degree initiate, working from 1606 to 1669. He came in as a second-degree initiate and ended up with both feet on the third rung of hierarchy. His ray structure was as follows: Soul 2, Personality 4-6, Mental 3-1, Astral 4-4, and Physical 7-3. Rembrandt had 1 7th ray and 3 4th rays. A preponderance of 4th rays goes with a love of color as well as a desire to communicate with and move out towards the audience. The 4th ray confers radiance, the beauty of color and light in a painter, or melody in a musician. The 7th ray, on the other hand, gives the artist an ability to draw, to design, to organize the architecture of the work. Rembrandt very quickly became fashionable when he went to Amsterdam from Leiden, where he was born. During a later period of his life, Rembrandt became bankrupt, mainly through his own extravagance, probably as a result of the 3 4th rays in his makeup. Add to this his acquisitive 3rd ray mental, and he could not help but collect things. At this time, his marvelous collection of paintings, jewels, swords, armor, and precious costumes were publicly sold for a pittance. He had to leave his big, beautiful house in the fashionable part of Amsterdam and go to a very poor quarter. His original fine house is now open to view. He dressed his subjects in oriental costumes, weapons, and armor, to give a rich, romantic, and mysterious radiance to his paintings. At the same time, he was a very down-to-earth Dutchman with a passion for reality. His art is the synthesis of a tremendous attraction to reality, with a need to draw things as they really were, and a desire for the exotic, the dramatic, the radiant, the unusual, and the mysterious. As a 3rd-degree initiate, these were qualities he saw in the world of meaning. His 2nd-ray soul was really dominating other aspects of his nature. The essence of the 2nd ray, in its highest expression, is the quality of magnetic love which draws everything to itself, creating a unifying synthesis. This enabled Rembrandt to synthesize all the disparate qualities in his own makeup: realism, romanticism, religious devotion, drama. I see this as one of the major reasons why Rembrandt has become a symbol to all people everywhere of the great artist. People always recognize the quality of love which draws them magnetically. Rembrandt painted many self-portraits. This was not out of vanity. He saw them as a way of gaining insight into what made him tick, and as a measure of the passage of life in time. In his mature work, the empathetic quality of love and ability to identify with the other is exemplified in all his paintings. The 3rd-degree initiate is already a God-expressing individual. The soul is infusing the personality, and this can be seen in the self-portrait, which is in the Frick collection in New York. It is a very mature painting done about 1658. Here is a man who has just been made bankrupt, who has lost everything, his reputation, his possessions, his house, and who died later in poverty, buried in a pauper's grave. What does the portrait show? We see a man of extraordinary power, resilience, and nobility. He expresses a quiet calm and self-esteem, which is the hallmark of someone who knows who he is, what he is doing, where he comes from, without any outer show. It is a very simple pose, with Rembrandt sitting in a chair holding a stick and looking straight out quietly, impassively at the spectator, allowing who and what he is to demonstrate. He seemed to have the ability to see into the hearts of his sitters. Rembrandt could paint a beggar and make him look like a saint, not by idealizing but maintaining full realism, by conferring on his subjects without exception his own beautiful, loving, second-ray soul nature. The Jewish Bride in Amsterdam is arguably one of the greatest demonstrations of tender love in all painting. There is no way one can learn to paint anatomy as such an articulate vehicle of emotion as in the extraordinary tenderness conveyed here. Only a few painters have this capacity to paint reality as if it were actually happening. It is in the imagination and not in the eye. Perhaps he did not deliberately set out to create a painting full of love and tenderness. He probably got totally involved in the technical problems of realizing the inner vision of his second-ray soul. His color, in his mature style, is extremely restricted, selected from a narrow range of browns and yellows with touches of red and gold. Yet despite using very simple colors, he could achieve a radiance in all his work. In fact, with 3/4 rays in his makeup, he could not help being a marvelous colorist. In The Night Watch, again in Amsterdam, we have the feeling of communication, that something dramatic is happening before our very eyes. This scene of a company of guards, painted as a group portrait, was very popular in Rembrandt's day. The only other Dutch painter who could do anything at all with the subject was Frans Hals, who did it several times and rather well. But the conventions prevailing at the time were for such a group portrait to consist of an inert line of figures, which was boring in the extreme. Rembrandt, tackling this subject, sees it as a dramatic event, but also as an entirely realistic everyday occurrence. The painting shows the end of a night watch as the company of guards emerges into the morning sun. The light is used to highlight the faces in a natural but highly dramatic, effective, and lively way. The naturalness of the scene is accentuated by extraneous figures moving through the group, such as a girl on her way to the market, a little dog exploring, etc. It was probably the most ambitious painting in size and scope that Rembrandt had painted up to that time. But it began his downfall among his contemporaries, and from then his popularity waned. As his painting got better and better, he got poorer and poorer, so much for the Dutch public of his day and their taste in art. Rembrandt had a seventh-ray brain, and this is demonstrated in the complex composition. It looks entirely naturally done, with each figure standing happily and logically in its space. Yet the composition is highly contrived and carefully designed. Probably the outstanding quality of Rembrandt is his ability to confer a sense of unity. There is a picture in London's National Gallery of a woman bathing. It illustrates again, despite the use of a very narrow color range, his wonderful fourth-ray, radiant color sense, golds, reds, whites, and cool flesh color. Inherent in the pose of the figure is the second-ray modesty of approach, calm harmony with a sweetness of gesture. There is a beautiful portrait of the Christ by Rembrandt in Munich. It was probably sat for by the man next door, who was no nearer to being the Christ than you or I. Yet Rembrandt, with his second-ray soul empathy, was able to confer on him an extraordinary nobility of character and tragic beauty, the kind of thing one would associate with an initiate like the Christ. With the insight of a high initiate himself, Rembrandt is always looking at the world of meaning through his second-ray soul's love, tenderness, and patience. Leonardo da Vinci, 1452 to 1519. Leonardo da Vinci was, by any measurement, an extraordinary man. He was a painter, sculptor, architect, natural scientist, military inventor, the epitome of the Renaissance man. He had an enormous influence on his time. He invented the mortar, which is used so extensively in warfare today, and a very nasty catapult. He was engaged by the authorities of Florence to design the fortifications and ensure the freedom of the city-state. Needless to say, he had traveled a little way along the initiatory path and was the most advanced of all the painters we know, 4.4 degrees initiate. 5 degrees makes you a master, and so he was all but a master. What we are seeing in Leonardo is the detachment of the fourth-degree initiate, who is really totally detached from the world, who is dissecting cadavers to see the formation of the inside of the body for science. He spent hundreds of hours in his cellar cutting up bodies and drawing the results. Early anatomical studies are the result of Leonardo's drawings. A horrible pastime, but he liked it. Actually, he did not come out of our evolution at all. He came from the planet Mercury. He was really a human avatar and is now no longer in our solar system, but in the system of Sirius. He is now, in our terms, an eighth-degree initiate, like the Buddha. His ray structure is extraordinary, especially if one remembers that the combination of fourth and seventh rays makes for the highest type of artist. He had a fourth ray soul, personality 7-4, mental 7-3, astral 4-4, and physical 7-7. He could be nothing other than the highest type of artist in whose work both color and form are perfectly realized at the highest level. Leonardo does not use bright or obvious colors. What one senses in his work is that the pictures are whole, complete. It is not possible to say more than he is saying in each painting. It is as if each one communicates an almost cosmic meaning, which is only able to be represented through the radiance of that painting. They take hold of our imagination and impose their extraordinary, sensuous but abstract beauty on our minds. There has to be a reason why the Mona Lisa has such a hold on the imagination of countless millions of people in the world, most of whom have seen only reproductions. Why is this so? I suggest that it is our response to the fact that Leonardo is a 4.4th degree initiate, almost a master. One senses that he is no longer working in the three worlds, physical, astral, and mental, in which average humanity lives. His painting represents the beauty of reality in a spiritual or even a cosmic sense, which finds expression through the activity of the fourth and seventh rays. That is, through the relationship between color and form. In The Virgin of the Rocks in London and Paris, there is an extraordinary complexity of composition expressing Leonardo's abundance of seventh ray. Only someone with strong seventh ray influence in his makeup would feel impelled or have the ability to carry to such an extent the structure and rhythms creating the forms in space in his painting. It is the seventh ray ability to design and organize the material which creates such a unity throughout the whole intricate composition. But Leonardo has too much fourth ray to compose in a hard or dry manner. It is done by chiaroscuro, the relationship of light to dark, and by the manipulation of the edges of each form to overlap, allowing the eye to flow easily from one to another. It creates the sense of totality, of completeness, which is so characteristic of his expression. Raphael, 1483 to 1520. Everyone loved Raphael because he had the sweetest nature you can imagine. They called him the divine. When we know his ray structure, we can understand why. Soul 2, personality 4-6, mental 7-7, astral 6-4, and physical 7-2. He was a third-degree initiate, therefore spiritually polarized. He had an oversensitive physical body and did not live very long. He did his whole life work and died by the time he was 37. He was very influenced by Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo. What makes Raphael's work so attractive is the harmony represented in each painting. All movements within the composition have been resolved to create an absolute harmony, a stillness without deadness, a harmony which is somehow buoyant. His portraits are second to none. For example, take his portrait in London's National Gallery of Pope Julius II, a tyrant, an absolute rascal, and a very clever third-ray type. From Raphael's portrait, you might think he was a benign Father Christmas, whose grim mouth is only the result of losing his teeth. Raphael may have been sweet-natured, but he was not stupid. He simply knew better than to paint everything he saw. However, it is also an expression of his second-ray inclusiveness and goodwill. The tremendous geometry of the large figure compositions is organized and constructed using his seventh-ray mental and seventh-ray brain. This demonstrates in a wonderful sense of proportion. Everything is done with restraint, without a trace of the exaggeration that came in a later period of Italian art based on his work. It is the balance in his work between color and form, radiance and structure, atmosphere and architecture that makes him one of the really great painters. Michelangelo, 1475 to 1564. Michelangelo was mainly a sculptor, but he was also a painter, though he thought that painting was a very inferior art. That is a glamour shared by many sculptors. It did not prevent him from being a very remarkable painter indeed. His ray structure was soul 1, personality 4-6, mental 4-3, astral 6-6, and physical 1-7. He was 3.3 degrees initiate. He painted figures as pieces of sculpture, as if working from a block of stone. One senses a tremendous rhythmic energy spiraling up and down through the figures. The edges are hard, a technique rather liked by the first-ray painter, because the hard edge expresses more energy than the soft, blurred nuance. Although the figures are not as realistic as, say, a Rembrandt, they have enormous physical presence, being overlaid with Michelangelo's own powerful personality infused by his first-ray soul. His paintings are abstract ideals in the big first-ray sense of a symbol, of the Christ or of divinity. It is the broad world view of the first ray seen through the eyes of a third-degree initiate. Despite having 2 fourth-rays, Michelangelo's color is not very characteristic of fourth-ray radiance. It can be a little dry or pale and sweet, but in some cases can be quite powerful. He is more interested in the form than the color. However, it is interesting to note that the color is splendid and decorative in his paintings in the Sistine Chapel, as was revealed by the recent cleaning process. Michelangelo is now on Sirius and is the equivalent in our solar system of a 7th-degree initiate. Paolo Veronese, 1528 to 1588. Paolo Veronese was both a brilliant colorist and a superb organizer of forms, as we can see from his ray structure. He was a 3rd-degree initiate. Soul 7, personality 4-7, mental 7-4, astral 6-2, and physical 7-3. The 2 4s provided him with the beautiful, highly characteristic, and original color quality. He handles color marvelously, especially colors like rose, gold, blue, and flesh. His is the energy of the 7th ray, and those who are interested in painting may find inspiration from the color and organization of all his painting. Clarity, a sense of ease, is always evident in his art. There is breadth and simplicity, also glamorous splendor in the Venetian sense, luxury, ease, and grandeur. This comes from his 7th-ray soul and 4-7 personality, and enables him to build those tremendous compositions, like the Marriage at Cana in the Louvre, Paris, with dozens of figures. Paolo Veronese was a 3rd-degree initiate. He is now a 7th-ray master and will be very active in the world in the New Age. He will be in charge of and the inspiration behind the first 70 or 80 years of the New Age architecture, and so will powerfully affect the architecture of the next 150 years or so. He is already drawing up his plans. El Greco, 1541 to 1614. El Greco means the Greek, his real name being Domenikos Theotokopoulos, and he signed his pictures thus. He was another third-degree initiate, but with a first-ray soul and the following ray structure. Soul 1, personality 4-6, mental 7-7, astral 6-6, and physical 1-7. Born in Crete, he went as a young man to Venice to study under Tintoretto, and at first glance some of his early works remind one very much of Tintoretto. Certainly he was very much influenced by him during this period. His own innate color sense came from his 4th and 6th ray personality and double 6th ray astral. This ability was heightened and sharpened and given structure by his experience in Venice under Tintoretto, himself a great colorist. El Greco actually composes with color, making color provide the building blocks with which the picture is created. In his later painting, the flame-like forms become the outstanding characteristic, together with an elongation and distortion of the figures to a degree which gives his pictures a Gothic expressiveness and intensity. The power, vitality, the extraordinary impact of everything he painted is the expression of his first-ray soul, the ray of power and purpose. The fiery, flame-like quality is like his signature, his hallmark. It really reflects his knowledge or intuition about the nature of the energy which he embodied. He certainly knew on the soul level that he was a first-ray soul, and the quality of fire which all his greater pictures explore is the first-ray aspect, electrical fire from the central spiritual sun. This can be compared with the work of Raphael and Rembrandt, who demonstrate second-ray fire quality, solar fire. El Greco was a great religious painter, expressing genuine religious fervor. This gives his work its ecstatic quality, unlike many painters of the High Renaissance in Italy who were really going through the motions. For example, traditional devotional painters thought it sufficient to show people rolling their eyes to heaven. It is interesting to consider the influence of a nation's rays on the type of painting being produced. As we have seen, Italy has a 6th ray soul and 4th ray personality, and many Italian painters have the same rays. So in Italian painting there is often a measure of play acting. It can be overblown, the figures and forms are flying too much in the air, or the gestures are too broad. With El Greco, the energy of the 1st and 7th rays are at work, giving his work a rhythmic, linear integration throughout the composition, and an absolute seriousness and purpose. He is now a master, a 6th degree initiate, working on the inner planes from the atomic level. Albrecht Dürer, 1471 to 1528. Albrecht Dürer was a German painter of the 16th century. He had a first-ray soul, and as 2.4 degrees initiate, was halfway between the 2nd and 3rd initiations on the verge of spiritual polarization. His ray structure was as follows: Soul 1, Personality 7-4, Mental 7-4, Astral 4-6, and Physical 1-7. His paintings typically have a hard, linear, wiry quality, the first ray vitality expressed in line. He is not eloquent as a colorist, but he was a great draftsman and engraver. The technique involves cutting directly into steel, one line engraved at a time, and the result is a hard, tight, physical vitality which you cannot get in any other way. There was no nuance in his drawings, but there is an extraordinary realism coming from his northern origins. There is always a hint of expressionism, as we have come to call it today, which is seen, for example, in hands being portrayed as slightly tortured in expression. His drawing contains a tension in the lines which gives an unrest, an inner tension. This is the reflection of Dure's first-ray soul powerfully expressing itself through this as yet not quite its soul-infused individual. Dure was a brilliant draftsman and a powerful figure in German art, certainly one of the great influences. He is not everyone's cup of tea, I would say, because people are somewhat afraid of the first-ray expression in all its manifestations. But in art, in El Greco, in Michelangelo and Dure, it is remarkable. Dure is a master now on the only sacred first-ray planet, Vulcan. Velázquez, 1599 to 1660. Velázquez was a 17th century Spanish painter, 2.4 degrees initiate. He is known in the trade as a painter's painter. He is the kind of painter every painter loves. He is so technically marvelous that the paint looks as if it had never been handled or touched, as if he breathed it on the canvas. His color is always exquisite, as the numerous fourth rays in his makeup ensure. Grays, blacks and rose, and subtle flesh tints. His ray structure was soul 4, personality 7-6, mental 1-7, astral 4-4, and physical 7-3. The first-ray mind gives him his power, his breadth of view, his style, his grandeur. And the 7th sub-ray gives restraint, organizing power, a refined statement. He never overdoes anything, the way an Italian painter might. Double 4 on the astral gives his work its warmth and eloquence, but it is restrained by the 7th ray personality with its 6th sub-ray. Spain's rays are 6th ray soul and 7th ray personality, and of course the rays of a nation always influence the work of an artist, whatever their individual rays might be. Velázquez worked in the court of Spain for most of his life. He had the style and grandeur and restrained beauty of the perfect court painter. He is now a master on one of the higher spheres of this planet, the 5th sphere, working with the divas. 4th ray masters seem often to do that. His aim is to get to Mercury. This ends the article. This was an edited version of lectures given in San Francisco, USA, and Upbergen, Holland, in July and September 1986.